Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much. As Peter said, my name is Yoshi Kohno, and my research area is computer security and privacy. When many of you think about computers and computer security, you probably think about computer security for your laptop and your desktop computers, and also security for things that you do on the web, like read email and buy books. I think about these things as well, but for tonight, I want to help open your eyes to a whole new area of computer security for everyday objects. But first, I want to talk a little bit about my vision for the future. I believe that technology can be a great enabler. With technology, we can improve many aspects of our lives, from education to work productivity to healthcare and accessibility. The list of benefits goes on and on. I think this is wonderful and fantastic, but the question arises, are there any potential downsides? Well, it turns out that there can be when we throw a malicious hacker into the mix. Now, this hacker might be really malicious, or maybe they're just curious, inquisitive, and up for the challenge, but they have the potential to turn these wonderful new technologies upside down. They can create new problems for people, and they can heighten the risk of classic problems. For example, identity theft has been an issue for a very long time. Technology has only made that easier. A key focus of my research group at the University of Washington is to try to anticipate what might be the next hot technologies arising over the next 5, 10, or 15 years. And what might their security and privacy risks be, and how can we go about proactively addressing them? As I like to say, we really want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to receive the wonderful benefits of these new technologies without the associated security and privacy downsides. It's impossible to describe everything we do within our lab in a short amount of time. So instead, I want to focus on 3 key examples. I'll work on medical devices, children's toys, and for the bulk of this talk, I'll work on the modern automobile. I'll begin first with medical devices. Wireless medical devices have the potential to truly revolutionize healthcare. They can improve the quality of people's lives, and they can save lives. Here are 2 photos of an example present-day device, an implantable pacemaker. The pacemaker can issue small shocks to the heart at regular intervals to keep it beating correctly. This particular device also has short-range wireless communications capabilities, so it can talk with an external monitor, hospital equipment, or home monitoring equipment outside the body. Numerous other examples of implantable medical devices exist, such as neurostimulators for epilepsy or overactive bladder, and also insulin pumps for people with diabetes. The question we asked was, could there be any security and privacy risks with these wireless implantable medical devices? And if so, how can we go about addressing them? One of the best ways to try to answer this type of question is to experimentally understand a real artifact. And so that's exactly what we did in collaboration with researchers at UMass Amherst and the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. We obtained an implantable cardiac defibrillator that was first introduced into the US market in 2003. This implantable defibrillator, like a pacemaker, can issue small shocks to the heart at regular intervals, but can also issue a very large shock to the heart if it detects a potentially fatal heart rhythm called ventricular fibrillation. The device we had also had short-range wireless communication capabilities. We subjected this device to a battery of experiments, and we found that using our own equipment outside the body, we were able to wirelessly talk to this device and change its settings. For example, we were able to wirelessly use our own equipment to change the biographical information on the patient, the patient's name, date of birth, implanting hospital diagnosis, physician, and so on. We could also use our own equipment to wirelessly change the therapies on the device. For example, we could change the level of shock that it would administer if it detected ventricular fibrillation. And we could also turn off therapies so that it effectively would stop working. We could also use our own equipment to wirelessly talk to the device and make it issue a large shock that would otherwise cause ventricular fibrillation. At this point, I want to step back, however, and say that the risk to patients is actually small today. So if you're a patient or know someone who is a patient, I don't want you to be alarmed. These are life-saving devices and have the potential to improve the quality of people's lives or save lives. For example, if I was a patient and needed one of these for medical purposes, I have no qualms about getting one, including the one that we studied. That said, I believe the industry and the government also believe that this work is important because it provides a foundation for understanding what the security and privacy risks might be with future devices as they become more sophisticated and have more wireless long-range communications capabilities. It's also important to keep in mind that there are people out there that do what most of us would find bizarre. For example, there have been people who have posted animated images on epilepsy support group websites that would cause patients with photosensitive epilepsy to experience pain and seizures. What we want to do is we want to make sure that this type of thing does not happen as future medical devices become more sophisticated and more communicative. Let me talk briefly now about our work on children's toys. For better or worse, we're starting to see increasing computation in the objects that we buy for our children. For example, Video Girl Barbie has a video camera embedded in her chest. And there's also plenty of devices you can buy out there for your children that have embedded Wi-Fi capabilities and so on. The question we wanted to ask was, what is the current state of the art in computer and security and privacy for the objects that we are buying for our kids? To answer this question, we obtained a collection of children's toys, two of which had Wi-Fi capabilities. These wireless robots also had built-in webcams and built-in microphones. And unfortunately, we found it was actually very easy for an unauthorized party, maybe it's someone's neighbor, maybe it's someone else over the internet, to connect to these children's toys, turn on their webcams, and view what's happening inside the person's home. We found this particularly concerning because these devices might be in private places within the home, such as a child's bedroom, and so on. What might be even more disturbing, however, is the fact that there's a number of things that the designers of these technologies could have done to have significantly improved their security before putting them on the market, but this simply did not happen. Which leads us to the conclusion that computer security for everyday objects is really not in the forefront of the people's minds today. It's not in the forefront of the mind of consumers, and it's not in the forefront of the mind of developers. I would love to see this change. I would love to see, for example, Consumer Reports start to evaluate the computer security and privacy of devices, along with the things that they traditionally study, like battery life. And now for the modern car. What many of you may not realize is that the modern car is pervasively computerized. There's computers controlling the engines, the brakes, the dash. There's a computer that receives your satellite radio signals and converts it to an appropriate format to play over your radio. Newer cars and modern cars also starting to have computers controlling the steering. And this is all fantastic for many reasons. For example, these computers can improve the efficiency of your vehicle, improve passenger comfort, and these computers can also significantly help improve safety. The question we asked, however, is could these computers in the car be hacked? That is, could someone modify these computers and make them behave in ways they didn't expect? We approached this question from several perspectives, but we began by asking, what might an attacker be able to do if they could somehow physically connect with the car's internal computer network? All modern vehicles sold within the US have a diagnostics port exposed underneath the dash. This is federally mandated. When you bring your car in for service or have its emissions checked, someone will plug in a computer to this diagnostics port under the dash. So the question we asked was, what might an attacker be able to do if they could plug their own hardware into this diagnostics port? Could they do things like affect the engine? Could they do things like affect the brakes? You might answer, well, absolutely, of course not. This can't happen. Safety is critical for vehicles, and I'd be shocked if someone could connect their own computer to this car and do things like make it so the brakes can't stop. Others of you might be a little bit more skeptical. But the truth is, there's no way to actually know the answer to this question unless we experiment with a real vehicle. And so that's exactly what we did in collaboration with UC San Diego. We bought two 2009 edition modern sedans, roughly between 100 and 200,000 of which were sold in the US in the year of manufacture. We kept one of them up here at Seattle for our research team, and the other was kept in San Diego. And then we subjected these cars to a battery of experiments. This figure here shows our experimental setup, where we have our own computer, a laptop, connected to the diagnostics port underneath the dash. Now, obviously, this picture looks pretty clunky, but you can imagine an attacker making equipment much smaller, much more discreet, so that someone in the car wouldn't be able to see it. We then did a bunch of experiments to say, what could we do with this computer? Could we affect the engine? Could we affect the lights? And so on. And we found that we can affect numerous components. For example, we could exert arbitrary control over the dash. Here's a photo of us changing the speedometer so that it shows you going 140 miles an hour when you're in park. And of course, there's that pleasant banner ad at the bottom. But in reality, we could affect, again, almost all critical components in the vehicle. We could affect the lighting. We could make it so that when you press the brake pedal, the brake lights don't actually show up. We could also make it so that all interior and exterior lights of the vehicle turn off, and you can imagine what this might happen if you're driving. We can affect the engine so that it would turn off, or we could affect the engine so that you cannot turn it off. We can affect the transmission, the brakes, the HVAC system, and the list goes on. Since a picture is worth 1,000 words, I hope the video that I'm going to show you is worth even more than that. This is a video of us doing some of our experiments on a decommissioned airport runway. One of the PhD students, Alexei Cheskis, who is in the audience, will be driving our test car down the road. To this test car, we have connected our laptop, again, to the diagnostics port underneath the dash. Carl will be effectively controlling this laptop. What Alexei's going to do is he's going to drive, and then when he hits 20 miles an hour, Carl will be typing a message onto that computer that'll send a message over the car's internal network to the brake controller that'll apply the brakes. You also see Alexei talking a little bit over the radio. So here we go.
2, 1, 0, now.
So now Alexi's driving.
Hit the brakes at 3, 2, 1, 0, now.
Carl sent the packet.
That was cool. Really scary, but cool.
And so you can see that Carl used his own computer connected to the car's network to forcibly apply the brakes, even while Alexi had his foot on the accelerator. Here's another video of us disengaging the brakes. Same experimental setup as before. Alexi's going to be driving. When he hits 20 miles an hour, he's going to have Carl send the message over the car's internal network, and this time disengaging the brakes. Here we go.
3, 2, 1, 0.
And now he's driving.
Send the packet at 3, 2, 1, 0.
You can hear him pumping the brakes, but he can't stop.
Okay, now I'm at 20. I still can't brake.
You can see the end of the runway approaching.
Let me try the efficacy of the parking brake in case someone actually might be in the situation.
So in this particular case, the parking brake did work. The parking brake on our vehicle was under mechanical control. Parking brakes on other vehicles are under electronic control, however. And we also only tested this at 20 miles an hour. We didn't want to test it on highway speeds. So at this point, you might be saying, okay, well, that's interesting. You can affect the engine, you can affect the brakes, you can affect the lighting, but you had to physically connect to the car and plug in your own computer. What does that actually mean that the risks are? Is there really a threat here or not? After all, if someone can connect to the car and plug in their own computer into the diagnostics port, they could probably do other things to sabotage your vehicle. Which brings us to our next research question. The next question we asked is there any way for an attacker to obtain the same capabilities that I just described without ever physically touching or even getting near the vehicle? It turns out that the answer to this question is yes. In fact, we found and experimentally verified 4 distinct ways of obtaining these capabilities. But in the interest of time, I'm only going to describe one of them. Our car has a built-in telematics unit. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, a telematics unit allows for remote monitoring and diagnostics of this vehicle. Our car's telematics unit has a built-in cell phone, uses a built-in cell phone, and can establish a telephone connection over the regular telephone service with a remote telematics service provider. And again, our car has a built-in cell phone. So you can imagine, for example, that if your car gets in an accident, the computers in your car can detect that it's got in an accident and effectively make a phone call for 911. You can also imagine the telematics service provider calling your car's phone number and unlocking the doors if you've left your keys inside. But this ability for them to call your car's phone number and unlock your doors also means that there's a potential for an attacker to call your car's phone number. Through a significant amount of reverse engineering, we developed the capability to call our car's phone number using a regular old office phone, and then play the appropriate modem tones that would exploit a vulnerability in the telematics unit that would effectively allow us to get our own software running on that telematics unit. Now, having called this car's phone number from a plain old office phone, and having our own software running on the telematics unit, we could do everything that I described in the first part of this talk. We could affect the engine, the brakes, the lighting, and so on. What's perhaps even more interesting is the fact that this telematics unit, because it has a built-in cell phone with a data plan, is that we can now establish an internet connection from our unmodified car to our servers at the University of Washington. We can now do things like type into our servers at the University of Washington, honk the horn, and all the cars connected to our servers would honk their horn. In our case, both the UCSD and the University of Washington cars. To try to explore this scenario and this threat a little bit more deeply, we developed and studied 2 end-to-end scenarios of how this might be of interest to an attacker. So I'm going to show 2 more videos. So in this particular video, again, after calling our car and after compromising the vulnerabilities in the car's telematics unit and getting our own software to run on the car, now we can do things like we can have our car's telematics unit tell our servers at the University of Washington the GPS coordinates of the car. We can unlock the doors, and we can effectively enable a theft scenario, as we're going to show right here.
We're going to steal this car over the internet. This car has an IRC bot on it that will let us communicate with it.
That's your laptop, which is connected to the internet. And the car is also connected to the internet. So again, it's an unmodified car, but connected to the internet because we've exploited our vulnerabilities.
And then it's just a simple matter of executing the theft program.
So she just ran our theft program.
And then my colleagues can just drive the car away without a key.
So the car just started, no one's in the car. There's Carl. The doors were unlocked because of our theft program. You'll notice there's no key in the ignition. Like any good thief, though, he buckles up. I highly recommend everyone buckling up.
All right.
Shift out of park and drive away. We also bypass what's called the immobilizer, which is supposed to protect against this type of theft, and supposed to prevent the engine from continuing to run. As another example of an end-to-end scenario, this one focused on surveillance. So one of the things that we realized was that after compromising the car's telematics unit has a GPS receiver, so the attacker can learn the GPS coordinates of the car. They can learn that, in fact, in real time. Our car also has a Bluetooth hands-free calling. What this means is that there are microphones within the car's cabin, and so once we've compromised the car's telematics unit, we can also turn on and stream audio from these microphones as well. So in this particular scenario, Alexi and Carl are going to be the victims, and they're going to approach the University of Washington vehicle, which has been compromised already by our collaborator Steve Checkaway in San Diego. So here we go. They're the victims again. They're going to go into the car and have an innocent conversation.
King Bowser's gonna be super excited that we finally kidnapped Yoshi.
Meanwhile, in San Diego, Steve Checkaway is sitting in his office. Again, remember that he's compromised the UW car by calling its phone number. Again, the unmodified UW car. And as you're going to see here, it's going to be the real-time GPS coordinates of the UW car are going to be plotted on this map. And also pretty soon you'll start to hear streaming audio. The audio that you hear was recorded in Steve's office, so the audio is of this high quality.
King Bowser's gonna be super excited that we finally kidnapped Yoshi.
So I want to step back a little bit and talk about our goals. The ultimate goal of us, computer security researchers and the people in my lab, is to try to figure out how do we improve the security of future technologies. The way that I talked about doing this tonight is by experimentally studying and understanding the weaknesses with present-day examples of these technologies. With this understanding, we can develop a foundation of what the issues might be so that we in our lab and people in other labs can proactively go about developing mechanisms to mitigate these risks. One of the other things we do, however, is we try to talk with the public and all the relevant stakeholders involved. And so, for example, in the automotive work, we've talked with people in Japan, in the US, in Europe, and so on. And in response to our research, the US Society of Automotive Engineers and US CAR, two leading industry associations, both created task forces focused specifically on automotive cybersecurity. The ultimate takeaway that I'd like you to have from this talk is that computers are not just in our laptops and our desktops, and computers are not just on the web, but computers are becoming pervasive in our environments. They're places where you might not have originally thought there to be computers, whether it's medical devices, children's toys, automobiles, or anywhere else. I believe that these computational capabilities bring many benefits, but they also bring potential computer security risks. And the first and most important step towards addressing these risks is awareness and understanding. You need to know that you have a problem before you can address this problem. We need this understanding by technology designers, the people who are creating these technologies, by policymakers, and by consumers. I would love it, for example, if all of you, after this talk, would go out there and the next time you thought about buying something, whether it was a children's toy or a car, would think to yourself and ask, could there be potential security and privacy issues with this? And I think that if enough of us start asking this question, the manufacturers will think about proactively asking it more too, and hopefully proactively bringing security to our devices that we have. Of course, none of this work would have been possible without the wonderful people in my lab at the University of Washington, so Alexi, Tammy, Miro, Roxana, Carl, Tope, and Franzi. And also, the work that I described was done in collaboration with a number of great researchers, both at UW and elsewhere. And so these are the people that work with us on medical devices, children's toys, and automobiles. Thank you.
Wow, you can really see how the physical is blending with the virtual nowadays. And I was thinking, as I was listening to you, I'm feeling pretty silly right now because earlier today I was kind of worried about the pressure in the tires of my car.
Oh,
seems like that's the least thing I have to worry about now.
Well, maybe, honestly, I believe that the risk to people today is very small. I mean, the type of work that we did required a significant amount of effort. So I actually do believe whether you drive a vehicle or whether you have a medical device, that the risk today is actually small. What my hope is that, though, by understanding that there is a potential risk, we can start proactively addressing it before 5, 10, 15 years roll down, and then the risk actually increases because these technologies are more exposed, have more communication capabilities, more computation. And so, I don't suggest that everyone leave your car in the parking lot and walk home and never get in a car again, nor do I suggest that you lock your children's toys in a closet and never let them out. But instead, I suggest that you be kind of conscious about the fact that there is an issue, and every time you have an opportunity when you talk with a manufacturer or someone to say, you really should be thinking about security, you now have a little bit more evidence for why security is important. But again, I don't think people need to be, quivering in their boots.
Actually, I have a son who just got his learner's permit 3 days ago, so we should talk later.
Okay, let's do that.
And I'd like to give the audience a chance to ask some questions, but you might want to think about questions that you'd like to ask. But let me start by asking, how on earth did you start thinking about cars or the whole idea of hacking into a car?
It's a good question. So one of the things that we do within our lab is we try to say what might the new technologies, hot technologies be out there in 5, 10, or 15 years, and where are their computers? And so we're constantly reading the news, looking at new product announcements. In fact, my entire lab went to CES, the Consumer Electronics Showcase in the spring, just to see what technologies are on the horizon. And we saw a bunch of things there that I think are going to be interesting targets for future study.
Great. If there are any questions from the audience? Yes, back there. Please stand up, and I'll try to repeat the question for everyone else. Great question. And, who is responsible?
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible. Actually, determining who is responsible is an incredibly big challenge because there are so many stakeholders in place. I would like to say that all of us have a little bit of responsibility. I don't know exactly which party to focus on. But I do want to actually, your question did bring up one issue that I do want to discuss. And that is that in the talk I talked about how we could compromise the car's internal computers via basically the telephone network. And you asked, well, does that mean that it's the telephone, the ISP's responsibility, and so on? I should point out that we found a number of other entry points that did not use the telephone network at all. For example, our car has Bluetooth hands-free calling. That means that there is a computer within the car that can speak Bluetooth. Well, we can infect our car via that Bluetooth interface as well. Our car also has a CD player. It takes in a regular CD, you put that CD into the car, and then you can play that music. Well, in the lab, we've developed a CD that you put into your laptop, you put into Windows, PC, Mac, whatever. It plays Beethoven's Ninth. You put it into our car and unlocks the doors. Obviously, you can make it do other things as well. And we also found that the technician tools, that when you bring your car into service, the technicians will plug something into the port underneath your dash. That tool that they plug into the port underneath your dash also has Wi-Fi capabilities. Well, we can compromise those tools as well. And then subsequently, they could infect any car they're connected to. So it's really not a single point of failure in terms of the ISPs and the phones, but really there's computer security issues in places where you might least expect it.
Well, Yoshi, now that you've caused the blood to drain from everyone's faces in this audience, let me again thank you very much for a really stimulating lecture.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.